It's Monday, June 8th, 2015. Thank you so much for joining me on another edition of In Touch. I'm sorry we were not with you last week, Monday. I was out of Ireland, but as promised, we are back with a very informative program. Those of you who have been following for some time would know that I would have announced some time ago that we will have officials from the St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction Project to update you on the status of the project and to share with you some of the details as to what exactly is happening down at the reconstruction site. Where are we in terms of this project and what is involved in terms of the cost and preparation for the completion of St. Jude Hospital. I know you have been impatient, you have been asking a lot of questions, and so I'm very pleased that Ms. Shanta King, who is the project manager, and Mr. Mandish Singh, who is the consultant on the project, are with us tonight to shed some light and especially to answer your questions as well. So without any further delay, I want to welcome my two very special guests. They have all the answers, I believe. I'm very confident that they do because I have had discussions with them, especially Ms. King. And, you know, you both have been involved in the project for some time now. And I think this program is long overdue. And many St. Lucians have been looking forward to a program like this where they can learn from you and can interact with you, because we are really speaking about a very, very important project that will impact the lives of all St. Lucians, not just the people of Vieux-Fort South. So good night and welcome to In Touch.
Hi, good night.
Good evening.
We started today with news that the government of Mexico had made a contribution to the St. Jude Reconstruction Project. And I note some of the comments from members of the public, and they are saying St. Jude is always receiving money. And for so many years, this project has been ongoing. We keep hearing from government officials that various partners have contributed to that project. Tell us a little bit more about today's ceremony, how much money was received, and what exactly it will be used for.
Okay, thank you very much, Jadia. The ceremony today basically was an opportunity for the government of Mexico to officially hand over a donation contract, which signified their donation to St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction. The donation amount was just about 2.65 million US dollars. That contribution will go towards some specific subcomponents, the morgue, the area lighting on the compound, as well as an ambulance and security building. So the donation is very specific. It's specifically geared at dealing with these project subcomponents. As you would imagine, though, the project is much bigger than these three subcomponents. So in as much as we have been receiving contributions from various partners, and with the most recent contribution being that of the government of Mexico, the project is one that has come at a heavy price to the government of St. Lucia. And we are therefore very appreciative of, you know, all contributions that we could get from various traditional and non-traditional donor partners. With respect to the overall cost, one would imagine that a reconstruction of a hospital of that nature would be very, very costly. Just to give you a sense of cost, we estimate that, you know, the final cost of the hospital will be in the region of 138 million EC dollars. So in as much as we have been receiving contributions, you know, the hospital is very costly. One of the key things that we need to bear in mind is that this was an unplanned project. Unplanned from the point of view that although there was a need for reconstruction, rehabilitation, this was forced onto the government of St. Lucia because of the events of
disaster,
September
really. Yes.
2009, which was the fire to the surgical building. So that made it a bit difficult in terms of being able to mobilize the financing required to reconstruct the hospital. At the time, it would have been a bit irresponsible for government to simply repair the damaged part of the hospital and to leave the rest of the hospital in a state of disrepair, which is what it was at the time of the fire.
But I will tell you, I don't think St. Lucians ever truly got the sense as to what exactly was happening in terms of St. Lucia's approach, the government's approach to dealing with the disaster and building back. At some point, the public was of the view that we were simply going to be repairing the areas damaged by the fire. And then there was a revision and we began seeing plans for the hospital. And so we were under the impression again that apart from simply rebuilding, that we would be putting in some additional facilities. And then you go to visit the site, as I did with the Prime Minister, and then you truly get a sense of how significant this project is and that we are dealing with the construction of a totally new facility that in many ways does not represent what existed there before. At what point did we actually bring the public into the discussion and really say to people, okay, this is what we are dealing with? I think many people appreciated the disaster, but never truly got a sense as to what exactly was happening and what was the approach really to dealing with that disaster. How did we move from disaster mode basically to where we are today?
Well, I think a number of things happened and perhaps a number of necessary things did not happen at the right time. Again, initially the response was that of dealing with a fire, dealing with a disaster, dealing with St. Jude Hospital operating from a stadium, and they were operating from the stadium fairly soon after the fire. The whole response to St. Jude had to move from a disaster response to a reconstruction project.
Yes.
I actually came in at the beginning of 2010, so that was pretty much about 6 months after the disaster. And that is when we started in a different mode in terms of looking to the future, in terms of how we are going to deal with the reconstruction, rehabilitation, renovation of the hospital. One of the key things that I will just touch on, and Mr. Singh can go into a bit more detail on, was that in as much as the surgical building was the main building that was affected by the fire, the rest of the buildings were in such a fragile state that perhaps if government had decided to simply repair the surgical building, there might have been a fire in the East Wing maybe the year after, because the electrical infrastructure, for example, was, you know, in a state of disrepair. So it's one where, you know, a number of things, you know, creeped up, and there was a need to take a more holistic approach in terms of the rehabilitation of the hospital, which resulted in a total reconstruction. And perhaps Mr. Singh can
highlight and I'd love to bring Mr. Singh in here, because when we first spoke about, for example, the donation today, and we spoke about the project components, you mentioned, for example, part of that going to the morgue. And if you understand the cycle of life, then we understand that this is basically the final. And if we were to put that in terms of the project and we begin to speak about financing going towards the morgue and so on, I think many solutions are saying, okay, I think we are getting there. I think finally we are getting to the end of this project. The big question on everybody's mind right now is how much longer must we wait for the St. Jude Hospital to be delivered to the people of St. Lucia? Tell us a little bit as to where we are right now. And I know it is going to take so much to take us from the fire up to this point today, but we really want to get a sense as to how close are we? I don't want to use the word far. How close are we to delivering this state-of-the-art hospital to the people of St. Lucia?
Well, to use the term, we're in the final stretch. The main impediment to progress has been finance and capital.
Yes.
I mean, this project truly has been a labor of love. A lot of people involved in the project have gone above and beyond what one would normally do. As Ms. King had alluded to, it wasn't a planned project in the sense that there was a plan to do the renovation or to replace it or to reconstruct it. We had to act. And as such, there was a call, and many of people and governments and agencies who are friends of St. Lucia did what they could to initially capitalize or create a capital base to actually move forward. Now, as you move forward, some of the challenges that we came across were that there were extensive amounts of asbestos on site. Yeah. So as the cleanup operations got underway with regards to the surgical ward, which was tragically burnt down in the fire, the rest of the buildings were looked at, and we found that the actual roofing material was consisting of asbestos. So in the days when the Americans first came back, and there's a long history to this site, in 1942 when the site was actually developed as a hospital, the materials that were used in the day were the materials of the day, and without much knowledge of the impact to health. And as we know subsequently, asbestos is a very harmful to health material once inhaled. So a decision had to be made, what do we do about the other buildings? And a decision quite sensibly was made to strip the buildings of the asbestos, not only at the roof, but also the insulation to the hot water system was asbestos coating. So it was everywhere. It wasn't just in the roof. And then, of course, you start stripping the roof, and you find the rafters have termite. You know, all these things were covered like in an old building. The building's over 70 years old. So as you peeled back the layers to get at these issues, you found more problems. So you had to then pause. Dear project manager, we need more money.
Do you think this is because there was not a comprehensive assessment of the St. Jude Hospital immediately after the fire, before a determination is made as to where we are going and what exactly the project would entail? Do you think that there was sufficient inquiry so that we could understand, firstly, the magnitude of the fire, and secondly, what it would take to deliver proper health care to the people of Vieux Fort especially?
Well, as we said, the initial focus was on the surgical ward, so all eyes were on the surgical ward, and all efforts were to let's finance the rehabilitation of the surgical ward. So that was a natural disaster reaction, you know. But as you got onto the site and started looking and peeling back the layers, as it were, then it started to emerge that, okay, as the cleanup operation is going on, that was when the asbestos was discovered. So it wasn't as if there was some construction works ongoing on the surgical, and then the asbestos was uncovered. It was covered almost immediately. And then, of course, is the question, do we now just repair the surgical and leave that alone? Or do we now look at a more holistic redevelopment of the site? Because that's what it would entail. In gutting the east wing, the west wing, and the ancillary buildings would require a complete reconstruction of the whole site. And then an opportunity to replan the services that would be offered for St. Jude. You're not confined to what had organically grown onto the site. For example, certain services came in time, then you just try to shuffle things around to make things work. Things were quite inefficient. You know, not offering, let's say, the most optimum service. So an opportunity arose to say, hey, how can we redevelop this site? What kind of services do we want to provide? What level of service do we want to provide? And then, of course, what would it take to do that? And at that juncture, there was a rethink, a replanning, and then, of course, the cost emerged. You know, and the challenge was, as I started to say, was the actual financing of the project, because it wasn't planned fiscally. It was basically from a disaster, and it rolled into a complete redevelopment. And of course, then finances had to be obtained either from internal sources or from external sources. And the money, it wasn't a magic wand that was waved and the money just arrived. There was a huge effort to help to get that sum of money together so we can progress.
Ms. King, you told us a little bit about what the estimated final cost of the project would be. And we have been hearing figures and revisions all along the way. And Mrs. Singh just explained that as you go, your response would be different, and you would be basically looking at other components of the project that you now have the opportunity to address. But where are we right now in terms of financing of the project? Are we going to hear about 2 weeks from now that whereas the government of the Republic of China, Taiwan has contributed X amount, and whereas Mexico has pledged X amount, we are now discovering that we would require an additional $50 million or so, and we do not know where or how. And so yet again, this final stretch will become another year in the life of the people of St. Lucia. Where are we in terms of financing? Are we comfortable that we can deliver the project to the people?
I think that we are fairly comfortable that we can do so. What we have done, we have broken up the projects. Well, we had done that quite some time ago when we were seeking additional financing. We have broken up the project into phases. So we have the most critical phase, which is phase 1, that we are very comfortable that we can complete with our current resources, with the loan funds that we have received recently, and with this contribution today. From the government of Mexico. So we are very comfortable that we can complete the first phase. And the first phase basically includes most of the critical services, if not all of the critical services that we need to commission to have St. Jude Hospital relocate from the stadium back to its original home. With that said, the second phase, part of the second phase includes 1 or 2 of the Government of Mexico components. Again, with respect to timelines, we are mindful that there's a time frame associated with physical construction, etc. So some of the components of the Government of Mexico funded aspects would coincide with our original first phase, which is currently financed by the government of St. Lucia, government of Taiwan, and other partners. That first phase, we expect to have all the existing buildings that are currently on the ground to be commissioned and up and running. These buildings would allow full functionality of the hospital. There are components that would run into the second phase, and these are more ancillary to the functioning of the hospital. So, for example, we have an accommodation building on site. In the past, these buildings would have housed interns, they would have housed specialists that would come to support St. Jude Hospital. And you would know St. Jude Hospital basically has operated on the principle of volunteerism over the years. And up to now, even with the current status of things at the stadium, we still have these volunteers coming every year to support St. Jude. So that accommodation building, for example, has been pushed into the second phase because it's not critical to the clinical functioning of the hospital. So we are fairly confident that with the current resources, the first phase can be completed, the hospital can relocate. And I think we are confident too with respect to the current figures that we are dealing with. And again, as you would imagine, because of the constraints we've had with financing, every month that is delayed, every 6 months, every year, things change. The price of commodities change, shipping costs change. So the challenges we've had with financing has almost put us in a loop where, the longer we've taken, the more costly it has become because, circumstances, especially where procurement is concerned of goods, that changes, all the time. So the prices that we are dealing with in 2015 were not the prices that we were dealing with in 2010. So there are price, adjustments that happen on an annual basis. All of our suppliers adjust their prices annually. Okay. So if you're not able to complete within the time frame that they've given you quotes, then, you're subject to price adjustments.
I want to ask Mrs. Singh a little bit about the project itself. And I really want our viewers to get a sense as to what is happening down there at St. Jude's. and many persons know the hospital, well, the former hospital. And I have noted that we have a number of new components to this project. There are facilities that did not exist under the old St. Jude that will now exist under the new St. Jude, and will be offering services that would not have been offered in the past. I think St. Lucians can only get a true appreciation for the magnitude of this project if we are able to share with them what are some of the new components of this hospital. What is it that currently exists, or we are currently working on delivering, that would not have existed under the old St. Jude Hospital?
Sure. Bringing the infrastructure and buildings up to modern standards has been a challenge, and costly as well. So, for example, sustainability in an emergency. We have droughts. We have problems with water, particularly in Beaufort. In the old infrastructure support that we had for the hospital in terms of water, there was a 66,000 gallon tank, which gave you like half a day of water. Yeah, that's now been augmented to 466,000 gallons, which would enable the hospital to function for at least half a week, 7 days, if for whatever reason the water supply was interrupted. Yeah, a wastewater treatment plant for the hospital. The hospital generates waste. In the past, that was just pumped directly into the system and with no treatment. So environmentally, there was an issue that had to be addressed. So a wastewater treatment plant specifically for the hospital is now in place, so that any discharge into the environment is now treated before it gets there. A warehouse. The hospital previously took its supplies in limited stock and was continually purchasing in a very sort of limited way, which is not efficient when you're dealing with a facility like a hospital. So a new warehouse has been constructed from scratch, brand new, so that the supplies could be purchased more efficiently and in bulk, and then distributed around the hospital in a manner in which the hospital requires them, as opposed to just, we've got to get something next week. You can plan ahead months in advance. So a warehouse has been constructed. In terms of facility, which is required and was identified by St. Jude and now has been accommodated, a dialysis unit.
Very critical,
so
especially in today's environment.
Absolutely. So now we have a dedicated dialysis unit for patients to come in, get treated and leave. And again, you can plan now a schedule, people to come in, because you have the facilities, multiple facilities for dialysis, a dedicated unit. Also, it's a hospital, and the previous hospital only had common wards. We've now made facility 4, and again, it's feedback from St. Jude and the users of St. Jude, a request for private wards. So if you feel so inclined and you want to pay a little extra, you can have the comfort of a private ward, as opposed to being in the general wards. General wards are still there, of course. And that extends through to maternity. So maternity now will also offer a private room post-birth. Any care for the baby, etc. You can be in a private environment if you choose to do so, be in there. Security. The old facility wasn't very secure. People would come in and out as they please. There wasn't any, comfort in terms of security. And we have had incidents in hospitals, yes, as you know. Yes. And staff from St. Jude who were consulted, that was almost like number one. We need to be secure in this environment. So fencing, proper security fencing has been planned and will be installed. Also the systems, CCTV, the fire system, etc. There's going to be a security room which will monitor the hospital 24/7. There'll be a card entry system, and the hospital will be zoned. So people can't just wander about once they're in. If you don't have that card to go into that particular zone or that particular department, you're not getting in. Wow. So we're bringing up the level of service to something that people are akin to. I think
this one will be, it would take a little time to adjust, because the St. Jude Hospital has been seen as a community hospital. Listen to me. I remember St. Jude being on a Sunday afternoon, for example. There are persons who would leave their homes and simply walk into the hospital to visit every single patient in the hospital and just walk through ward after ward after ward. Hello, how are you doing today? And so on, So I think this one, there would be a little adjusting, because it has been seen as a community hospital.
I don't want to give the impression that it's going to be a Fort Knox or anything like that. But in our present day, you have infections, you have patients who are there for a purpose.
Yes.
They need peace and security, privacy to recover from whatever ailment that they're being treated for.
Yes.
And at the same time, there has been attacks on staff and patients.
Yes, and patients.
It's happened.
The gang violence and so on. I know about it.
So we need to actually, monitor that and provide the facilities to have that level of security and care. There's been extensive improvements to the radiology department.
Okay.
We've actually, the theatres have been reconstructed with their lining and all the equipment, I would say state-of-the-art equipment that is required for a modern hospital in terms of radiology, X-ray, etc. Also, we're in we want to have a facility which can be maintained and also the operational cost kept as low as possible. So solar power, water is throughout the hospital.
Excellent.
So lots of solar power for the water heating, and also in certain buildings, photovoltaic electricity.
Okay.
So we've tried to, with the thanks of donors, and there are funds out there that will support this kind of initiative, and through Ms. King's department and other ministries, those funds have been sourced specifically for those purposes, so that we can utilize those funds to try and reduce the operating costs of the hospital, particularly electricity. And we're blessed with sunshine, so let's use it.
Yes, indeed, indeed. I think this is tremendous, especially what we're doing in terms of energy efficiency. Like I indicated, the area of the security and the zoning, I think we would have to do a lot of education, informing people as to this is what exists. This is because it's a culture, and especially if you see it as a community kind of facility, then definitely we would need. But I think people in this environment truly understand why it is important, and we have been stressing when we build back, we need to build back better. And building back better is not just in terms of the resilience and the strength of the buildings, but we need best practices. Many persons, Ms. King, have been saying, in as much as this facility will be a wonderful facility and we are focusing so much on having a new building, I simply do not want a transfer of what is currently at the George Odom Stadium to that new facility. Now, I will be the first to say that I believe the staff at the George Odom Stadium are doing a tremendous job. For many of them, especially those who worked at the St. Jude Hospital before, you get accustomed to your environment. There is routine in terms of where you go, the direction that you take. And so I understand that it may be a little difficult moving from that comfortable space, designed as a hospital, operating as a hospital for so long, into the stadium. So I understand that. But we have been hearing some stories. Some of them may be true, some of them may not be true, but it has created an image and a perception, and the people are saying, what exactly can be done, or is anything being done to focus on the quality of care at the St. Jude Hospital, so that at the end of the day, all of the wonderful things that we have heard in terms of additions and changes can actually be for good, and that people cannot be sidetracked by all of the other issues, human relations issues and so on, and truly enjoy quality care?
Well, we work very, very closely with the management of St. Jude Hospital. As a matter of fact, many times people believe that we are all one, but there is a separation between St. Jude Hospital and St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction Project. We work very closely with the hospital, and what we've been trying to do, especially since we've had delays in terms of the final completion, we've been trying to advance things like training of the staff, even certain components of the project that we could implement at the stadium in advance of the move. We've been trying to do that, especially with respect to systems that they could start getting used to. There will be a need for a complete reorientation. The staff that would have left the old facility, when they go back, they will not just be going back to their old department in a location that they're familiar with. So we've been having a lot of training, and we've been trying to advance a number of components at the stadium at this stage. One of the things that St. Jude, I must say, St. Jude Hospital, in terms of the operation at the stadium, they have done a tremendous job. And many persons may not even appreciate the operation at the stadium. Right. One perceives the stadium and thinks that, you know, the hospital is probably in a tent in the center of the field, but really and truly they're not. I mean, they're buildings underneath the stands, and you know, thank God it was large enough
Yes,
to be able to house the hospital facility. So they've done an incredible job in terms of transforming the stadium into a hospital. And one of the things that we are confident about is that when the hospital, when they move back to the new facility, I think they're already in this sort of change management mode, because they've had to change. They've had to give up all old habits to be able to operate at the stadium. We're now working with them with respect to looking at issues of accreditation. As you can imagine, in this time, one could not operate a facility like a hospital without looking at best practices, international standards, etc. So the Ministry of Health in general, I think, is gearing towards accreditation of all the hospital and medical facilities on island, St. Jude being one of them. So we're actually working with them in terms of looking at policies and procedures that they need to basically implement when they move across. So we've been working with them at the stadium, but again, our focus is predominantly the infrastructure and associated equipment and outfitting of that
As
facility.
you mentioned, equipment and outfitting, let's talk about this a little bit, because usually when we're dealing with projects of that magnitude and so on, we focus so heavily on the actual infrastructure, getting the rooms right, you know, in terms of the sizes, in terms of what is going to go where. But now that we have said, for example, that because we were responding to a disaster, and this was not a planned project in the sense that we had a full map before us with empty space, and we know this is what goes where and so on. We had to make adjustments as we went along. Mr. Singh, any of these adjustments that we've had to make in terms of additions, subtractions, redesigns, and so on, would it affect, for example, our equipment at the end of the day? Would it affect do you foresee any difficulties in terms of the operations of the hospital, or are we making the adjustments across the board, both in terms of infrastructure and to accommodate our equipment as we go along?
The approach has been very much integrated. So for example, St. Jude had an inventory of equipment that they already had. That was taken into account, condition assessments made, and see how appropriate they were. The actual planning of the hospital itself and the departments and the rooms were essentially driven by the equipment. You know, so the equipment dimensions, the types of equipment for the types of services provided, the rooms were designed to accommodate. Right down to where the wall plugs are going, so that that cabinet fits there and that equipment fits here. We need to have a sluice here, we need to wash our hands there, etc.
Okay.
So it's been planned in a very integrated way.
So we do not foresee, after the hospital has been complete and we begin to see the wonderful photographs, we do not foresee delays associated with fitting of equipment and so on.
No, we've gone to a lot of trouble and time to actually get that right, and that's with St. Jude hand in hand. They know what they want, they know how they want to operate it, they know the kind of equipment that they need to provide the level of service that they want to provide. So they've driven that side of things, and we've merely responded and made things so.
Okay, Ms. King, I want to ask you, again, speaking about the whole relationship between the St. Jude Hospital and the St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction Project. I have noted, and I think it is something that many solutions have noted, it's almost as if one does not move without the other. When we are dealing with, for example, we see ceremonies or activities where you're receiving financing from donor partners and so on, or we're dealing with components of one or the other. I noticed, for example, that the CEO of the St. Jude Hospital will be represented, officials from the Ministry of Health will be represented, and so on. I am concerned to know whether the St. Jude Hospital management, staff, board, and so on actually know what they will be receiving at the end of the day. Do they have a very clear sense as to what exactly this project entails, what we will be delivering to them at the end of the day? So we'll discuss this right after this commercial break. And again, it is to get a sense as to what the transition would be like, because I'm hoping it will not be a long transition as we see, you know, the commissioning from VH to the new National Hospital, because the people of St. Lucia really have waited 6 years, and we're really hoping that we can minimize that transition time. So right after the commercial break, we'll be continuing our discussion with project manager and project consultant of the St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction Project. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Was Warren speaking to me? Okay, well, I'm not hearing anything.
No, I can hear him. He went down, but I can hear him out.
Yeah, just very.
Warren, talk to me again. Let me hear. I'm your host, Jude Emmanuel, and with me is the project manager for the St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction Project, and the project consultant is also in studio with us tonight. Before the break, I was asking you about that transition period, orientation, basically the staff, management, and so on, having a sense as to what exactly is going to be delivered to them, how do we move from point A to point B, and how do we make use of some of the new tools and facilities that will be available at the new hospital that would not be available at the old hospital and at the stadium. We are anxious. I think many persons want this hospital to be ready on Monday and to be operational on Tuesday. And we know that because of the magnitude of the project and so on, this is not how it works. But because of the length of this project, you would understand that kind of impatience. So are they aware, do they walk the site as often to see exactly what is happening and to at least get the comfort that I believe many of them are looking for, that we are indeed in the final stretch of this project?
I must say that we have worked very, very closely with St. Jude Hospital. As a matter of fact, in a very extraordinary way. I mean, when you look at even the experience with the new National Hospital and, you know, hospital projects in general, I could say that St. Jude Hospital staff, they've been the architects of their own hospital.
Oh, well, I'll elaborate a little bit. When the decision was taken to redevelop the entire site, and we had this opportunity to actually better plan what we had. Okay, we had existing walls, floors, and buildings. We had workshops with St. Jude Hospital staff, and that's actual staff. I'm not talking about anybody at a director level or that. I mean, actual people, the nurses and technicians and the people who make the hospital work. And we asked with a blank sheet of paper, what do you want to see inside the hospital? I mean, you have a department, dentistry, for example. With dentistry, what do you need? What don't you have right now? What would you require? And it was kind of like an open book session with the staff to hear from them what they require. And then over a period of time, we actually refined those ideas into actual drawings. And then those drawings were circulated and commented upon, augmented with site visits as the hospital had been being developed, etc. And of course there's changes because people sometimes don't have a perception of space. You know, if you're trained as an architect or an engineer, you can draw something and think, well, I can see that'll work. But to physically actually go on site and say, well, look, I'll spray here. Is this what you mean? Oh, no, that's too large. I could do with this slightly, So that little interactive process occurred early on in the project. So I'd like to think that, as Ms. King has alluded to, they have been the architects of the new facility. We had the constraint of working within an existing building. And one of the problems we had, unique to that particular site, if we remember, these buildings were built by the American military.
Yes.
We wanted to knock a door through a wall. It took us 1 week to actually get a hole through the wall. The wall was 2 foot thick, and the concrete was so hard that if we wanted to break the wall, we had to break the building. So that led to challenges whereby we then had to replan and rework some of the ideas that we had. So within all these constraints, I mean, I can hand on heart say that St. Jude have been very, very hands-on with what's going on in St. Jude's.
As you would imagine, I'm already receiving a lot of messages via WhatsApp especially and email. And there's a question coming from a member of the community, and I believe I received a call like that a little earlier. But perhaps he's just a little anxious that I would not address his issue, so I want to address it right now. And it has to do with the actual work happening at the construction site. He indicates that he lives in very close proximity to the construction site, and there is a problem of dust in the area that is blowing over to some of the households. And he's asking whether that can be addressed, or what can be done to address that situation.
I'll take that comment on board. We have been in a very extended dry period, and as you can imagine, with the activities of construction, etc., there would be dust. But what I can take instruction and check on site and see if what activities we are doing which is generating that dust. Normally you'd wet the floor, but we're mindful of the water situation as well. So, but if it is a nuisance, then it has to be addressed, and I'll raise that on site.
Indeed. I'm sure you have been hearing a number of complaints, and you've been hearing the reaction of the public to what has been happening at St. Jude's, what is taking so long at St. Jude's. We have been hearing dates after dates, revisions, for example. One time we are hearing this is the final Christmas at the George Odlum Stadium. Christmas comes and goes, and the hospital is still operating at the George Odlum Stadium. Is there a disconnect between what is actually happening on the ground, what is happening in Viewfort South with the actual work, the contractor and the workmen, and what is happening at the project office? And I ask that just to determine whether the information that is being filtered through is consistent, in that we know what is happening and our dates are on par, and that we are actually able to project. Because for the staff, firstly, they receive information, the dates come and go, nothing happens. The public is very much interested in this project, and by my own estimation, it is something that I've said a lot. I do not know if it is because of the politics involved, because you're talking about a project that has gone beyond administrations, and it was a political issue. It was an election issue before, and it remains a political issue right now. So this may be the reason. But this is the most talked about project in St. Lucia, in my view. And there is interest on all sides for a number of reasons. Where do we get the information wrong, really? And what is being filtered or sent from the site to the project office, to the Ministry of Health, to the Minister of Health, to the Prime Minister, to the public? Where are we getting the information wrong, basically? And is somebody not listening to somebody and basically saying whatever the public wants to hear at the end of the day?
Let me address that to a certain extent.
Sure.
I think earlier Mr. Singh might have given some information in terms of things that have contributed to the delays. One of the major issues was that of financing. In as much as, let's say, for example, we might have negotiated a loan at a particular time, one must realize that application for a loan, the actual even approval of the loan, disbursement of the loan, you know, there are time frames associated with that, there are a number of processes and procedures associated with that. Now, again, the technical persons on the ground would give a program, the best planned, projected program, and we would go according to that. Delays in terms of receiving funds would affect the program. This project is not a simple project where one is building 4 walls, right? Goods have to be procured. There was a time we had issues where goods were coming from Asia, from China, from Taiwan. Once goods are coming to St. Lucia from that part of the world, we need to factor in 3, 4, 5 months, because sometimes the transit period on the high seas, quote unquote, is as much as 2 months. So again, because of our location, we import everything associated with this whole construction process. And one of the things that we need to bear in mind, this is a hospital. It is not a home, it is not a warehouse. So with respect to the furniture, the equipment, even construction materials, these are specialized materials. So we have tiles that are antibacterial tiles. They're not the regular tiles that you would put in your home. We have wall finishes that have a specific antibacterial component, for example, that is probably manufactured on demand and not just on the shelf that you pick up from Sunbuilt or Home Depot and, you know, put a coat on the wall. So there are a lot of specialized components to this project, and there are things that we do not control. So if, for example, there's a delay in manufacturing, there's a delay in something, it affects the program and it would definitely, put us off. But these are things that we have no control over.
Sure, but my question would be, and I'm certain there would be more than one individual sitting in the living room and thinking the same thing.
Right.
How would we know? How would the public know if nobody says to the public, this is where we are, these are the challenges,
Right.
and as a result of these challenges, you can expect delays. It's almost as if we have totally ignored, or we are simply giving responses that we think people would love to hear. But from my own experience, I believe once you bring people into your confidence and you can say to them, we promise this, however, these are the challenges that we are facing, then you would find that the reaction is totally different. People simply did not know what was happening at the St. Jude Hospital construction site.
I don't think we've just given responses that we want people to hear. At any point in time, what information was provided was accurate information. The issue is that we are dealing with a very dynamic project. There are many, many issues affecting the operation of that project. And one of the major things we have mentioned is that of financing and being able to have the money required to implement all the components. Let me give you an example. More recently, we have obtained a loan from the Republic of China, Taiwan, and that has basically pushed us into the finish line, okay? Prior to that, each financial year, maybe for the last 2 financial years, we were basically implementing components that we were able to finance based on the resources that we had. So these components were maybe 10% of the entire, component.
So the major challenge there really was an issue of finance.
Right.
And for
so
me,
work was
I
happening,
think,
but it was not
at a snail's pace,
that's
because
right.
it is what we could have
So
afforded
we
at
had
the time.
X amount of money, we initiated works for X amount of money. So now we are pretty confident that with the funding that we have, we can, push things towards completion.
Indeed. We're going to go for a commercial break. When we come back, we'll be putting up our information on the screen, the telephone number, so that you can call in with your questions and maybe things that we've not covered in the discussion. Feel free to call in to ask your questions and to make your comments. Stay in touch. We'll be right back. Welcome back to In Touch. I know you're anxious to get your word in. I can see that the telephone lines are already blinking. Our telephone number is on the screen, so you can call in with your questions or your comments. Again, my guests are the project manager as well as the project consultant of the St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction Project. And we really have spoken about a lot tonight, but there may be issues related to this project that we have not covered that you'd want to ask a question about or share your views on. Good night. Thank you for joining us.
Jude, good night to your guest.
Hi, good night.
I have one observation and one comment.
Sure.
The host of the program did suggest that, we are solutions. Well, I would suggest we are solutions are a very understanding public. And if it is that the issue is of financing, I think that as project managers and so on, we should come out and we should say, listen, guys, the issue is financing, and I think that...
And ministers too, because I don't think that it would simply be the responsibility of...
I
think across the board there needs to be full disclosure at all times.
Yes.
Although the Prime Minister kept saying there was no money, but if only the Prime Minister is speaking, then people would say, well, you said you would deliver the hospital, now you're not delivering the hospital and you're saying it's no money. So where's the project manager? Where's the consultant? Is it that you're simply saying so for political reasons? So the communication of course, would go beyond the project office, but not simply just the political directorate, but there needed to be communication at all levels.
Yes,
I think.
I think I'm in agreement with you. I think it's
Yeah.
across the board responsibility, and I wanted to thank the government of Mexico.
Yes.
Today they donated over 2 million US, and I think that this is going to go a very long way in this hospital being commissioned. Now, I said I have a question. My question just before I hung up is, to your guest, do you know exactly what those monies would be pumped into? What is it that, is it to finish a certain section of the hospital so that we come out from the stadium, or are we going to do a complete completion? What is it that are we really pushing towards? Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you for that. And again, the caller highlighted the contribution from the government of Mexico. We spoke about that tonight. We indicated that there were other donor partners, but did not name them. They basically spoke in general. Maybe after you've responded to her question as to what exactly it is going to, we can begin to speak to some of our partners and the financing that we have received, because certainly we did not do it on our own. And, you know, I'm sure you'd like to highlight our generous partners as well.
Right. Regarding the contribution from the government of Mexico, as we had indicated earlier, these are towards specific components. So it's not just going into a general pool. It is targeted directly at the morgue building, the security and ambulance building, and the area lighting for the entire compound. Each component would have associated what we call renewable energy solutions. So this would mean energy saving solutions, whether it be through some kind of solar system or related system. In relation to other contributions, I think we would be familiar with the contribution of the Republic of China, Taiwan. Their contribution is twofold. One, through a grant. So we've received as much as 22.5 million EC dollars as grant from the Republic of China, Taiwan. And it should be noted that they were one of the first responders in terms of pledging to reconstruct the surgical building after the fire. We've also received support from the Republic of China, Taiwan through a lending facility. So we've also received a loan, and that is in the amount of 20 million US dollars. So that is by far the largest contribution in terms of, you know, donor support. Notwithstanding though, we have received contributions, apart from contributions from St. Lucians. I would say this project is probably a truly community project because, you know, the general man on the street could say, I have made a contribution to this project. Whether it be 20 EC dollars or 2,000 EC dollars. But I think when it is complete, you know, many St. Lucians could feel that they have made a personal contribution to St. Jude. We have received, for example, equipment from the US government. We've received contributions of equipment from corporations like Hess Corporation. We've received contributions from the Australian government, grants. One of our more recent grants was from the German government. As a matter of fact, Mr. Singh spoke about the wastewater treatment as well as the water supply. So the German contribution was specifically towards the water and wastewater facilities. So we've had contributions from many governments, the government of Israel, the government of India, and all of that would have been initiated after the fire when there was a general appeal for support for St. Jude. So we've had numerous persons contributing, and one of the things that we have pledged to do as part of a gesture of gratitude is to have an area in the hospital where there would be recognition of all of those persons that we are aware of. they would be recognized at somewhere. You know, there would be probably a donor wall where
Right.
you would see a small nameplate or something,
Okay.
recognizing the contribution of all the persons that we have noted.
And not just the person
we
who has
have
the pledge of
received.
opening the hospital.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, we have received contributions that have been anonymous,
Yes,
so
yes.
that's why I'm saying that we are
Those
aware
were
of, and we do have a comprehensive list of everybody that we are familiar with who
I'd
have.
also like to add that we've had tremendous amount of support from solution businesses, business owners, where we've tried to source materials, for example. We've always tried to work with local suppliers and local businesses. And then, of course, we've asked them to nail down their price to the bottom dollar so we could maximize, the amount of equipment and material we're getting locally. Obviously, with a specialized facility like a hospital, as Ms. King has alluded to, some of the material has to come from abroad. For
Yes,
example, it's specialist finish on there for antibacterial, etc. But where we could source equipment and or materials locally, the support has been tremendous, and that must be recognized in so much that people have discounted their prices, for example, for the cost of materials.
One of the other things that Mr. Singh perhaps would have mentioned as well is that even our contractors on site, all of them are making contributions to St. Jude in the form of donation. So, for example, we have the chapel building is one of the examples where all of the contractors associated with various components of that building, they are actually donating their components to the hospital.
Wow.
So the electrical work will be at no charge, the flooring.
Wow.
So, people may look and think, oh, these contractors, they have the job, but they too are giving back to St. Jude.
Indeed. I'm sure this is certainly something that would be noted. We have another call on the line. Good night, you're on the air.
Yeah, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
And good evening to you again.
Good evening.
I just want to really applaud the efforts made by your guests in disseminating information, because this was healthcare, the health of a nation is very important, and a lot of concerns were raised as to when would the hospital be completed. So
Yes.
I'm really thankful for that information. And I heard a lot of donors been mentioned, but I would like to ask, is there an ongoing fund? Like if somebody would like to make a donation, is there an ongoing fund or a drive? And another question, what would make that hospital, what features at St. Jude would make it different, would make it a modern hospital, because we are hearing about the new hospital that's going to be completed in Castries. So, looking at the St. Jude's Hospital, the pillar to the south of the island, what can we expect as a nation? When we drive into St. Jude, what are some of the things that would really make it unique and special and different?
Sure. Thank you so much for your contribution and your questions, caller. And just before you respond to the question on the ongoing drive, and I'm certain we'll have to take part of that after the break because we're due for a commercial break. But Mr. Singh, can you tell us, because it is inescapable, the comparisons between what is the new National Hospital and what we expect to happen at St. Jude. Just as we wrap up, can you tell us, not in a way that would pitch one against the other, but are you satisfied that what will be presented to the people in the south of the island is a state-of-the-art modern facility that would hold its own in any, and when you speak about accreditation and so on, would be able to present quality service to the people?
No, absolutely. There's been no compromise on the materials and the look and the feel of the hospital. It is going to be functioning as a modern hospital, and I'd like to think that visiting the new National and visiting St. Jude, you wouldn't notice the difference. The new National Hospital has been a planned project and had a greenfield site, so you could start from scratch. We've had the challenges of the existing building and the infrastructure, but the end result is going to be on a par or similar to both.
Beautiful. An ongoing drive. Where can people who still want to donate to the St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction Fund?
Well, basically, at the time of the fire, bank accounts were set up and that information was disseminated then. I must say, in as much as these accounts still exist and they are utilized from time to time, we have not really publicized that information again. So perhaps it might be a good idea for us to do that so that people are aware that these accounts still exist. If you wish to make a further contribution, you can. So it's one that I will take on board in terms of us sort of reinitiating that and making that information available. But the bank accounts are still in existence and anybody can make a contribution to the project.
Indeed, I think it's a wonderful idea. Certainly, I would love to take so many more calls and comments to hear from you what your thoughts are. But I think we basically have covered most of the main components of this project. I want to thank you, Mr. Singh, especially, and thank you so much, Ms. King, for agreeing to be my guest on the program. I want to remind my viewers that the program will be available on the YouTube channel so that you can pick up information from there. You can be informed and share the information to ensure that when we speak on this project, we speak from an informed position. And you can share it too, because there are individuals who would not view this program and would have questions. What are the components? What is the end date of this project, and so on. So I thank you so much for your contribution. I will attempt to respond to as many of your questions and your comments as possible that came in via WhatsApp, of course, with the assistance of the information received tonight. So I want to thank you especially for joining us tonight. As always, I want to thank the management and staff of Choice TV for providing the platform so that we can speak on issues of national importance. You can expect another edition of In Touch next week, Monday. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host, J.D. Japé Emmanuel.